Hello, and welcome. Let's get into it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 5. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And the New Living Translation, same thing, and evening passed and morning came, marking the first day. English Standard Version, pretty much the same thing. Burning Study Bible, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. With quotations marked, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Same thing. Morning, first day. Day 1, New American Standard Version. Okay. NASB, the only difference between the 2 years is the word "and" at the beginning. Amplified. No low extra notes. Okay, Christian Standard. No, nothing different. Nothing really different. Nothing different. Yeah, all these are just the same thing. All of them, there's so many translations. All of them say vastly. No, they don't. They don't. It's just a myth. Anyway. Commentator Paul Kissing writes that by morning, the day and night, God reveals his sovereign power over them. Seeing the light and darkness here as purely physical and in the ancient Near East, whatever. The act of giving a name meant above all the exercise of a sovereign right. Really? Okay. Gala Padashimor points out that the power of names and naming is displayed here, but that later in the narrative this power is also granted to Adam, the first human. According to John Calvin, if you're wondering, yes, that is the guy who founded Calvinism. God here is instructing a regular vicissitude of days and nights. Sure. The Zohar, on the other hand, interprets the verse as describing the emancipation which would be the foundation root of universal life. The Zohar is Jewish mystical gobbledygook, apparently. Actually, yeah, right here on Wikipedia. Zohar is the foundational work in literature of Jewish mystical thought as why are you using this as an actual source, Wikipedia? Anyway, the verse ends with a reference to evening and morning, which bring the first day of creation to a close. This raises the question of how evening and morning are possible in the absence of the yet to be created sun. Other planets have days and night cycles. But this will make sense with the idea of this is just an allegory for God's sovereign power and not meant to be taken literally. If you want more on that, go watch Inspiring Philosophy. He has videos about this. Anyway. Or you can always ask Mike Weiner. He has like a live stream every Friday at I think it's 5 California Pacific time. Yeah. Yeah. Augustine of Hippo, in his City of God, writes, "Our ordinary days have no evening." Okay. but by the setting, and no morning, but by the rising of the sun. Yes, the first 3 days of all were passed without sun, since it is reported to have been made on the fourth day. He explains the dilemma by interpreting the evening and morning in a metaphorical sense. Franz Delitzsch was a German Lutheran theologian and herborist. Okay, cool. Sees the evening and morning as the marking of the end of a day, in quotation marks, which annals in eons in length. What's this one? Is eons spelled with an A? Anyway, while others have seen it marking a literal 24-hour day. Oh yeah, 7 days to divide the world. Book. Go read it. Theistic evolution and age-day creationism follow the first interpretation, while young Earth creationism follows the second. Theistic evolution is basically evolution accepts the scientific consensus of the age of the Earth, the age of the universe, the Big Bang, the origins of the solar system, the origins of life, and evolution. So in other words, they just believe that yes, science is 100% true, but was God behind it? The age creationism is essentially the 24-hour days are not literal days, but much longer periods, because the word Om is also referred to a time period with a beginning and end, not necessarily a 24-hour day. Now, some do say that the Big Bang happened, but you get anything from like 7,000 years, because one day to the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is by a day. And then, well, young Earth creationism should be pretty obvious what that means. There interprets the Earth is around 6,000 or 10,000 years old. Evolution is false. Big Bang and all that other stuff is just made up nonsense. That's what they think. Anyway, still others give a literary interpretation in which the process of creation is described in human terms, using an analogy of the working week. Why? But if the others are true, why didn't God just tell them? Yes, because God needs to sum up 13.7 billion years to a bunch of people who just left slavery somewhere in the Sinai Peninsula. This is... This wouldn't be God lying or anything. No, Inspired Philosophy has done great work on it. Go watch his videos. Anyway, Jewish traditions, the fact that evening is listed first here, it has led to the idea that the day begins at sunset. That's why the Sabbath begins when the sun sets on Friday. Yes. That's when it happens. Okay, before the distinction of day and night was possible, there must have been outside the earth, not as yet the sun, but a bright both their centric mass, such as now enwraps the luminosity. Secondly, the Earth must have begun to revolve upon its axis. That is Eliot's commentary, as you can see. He may be a young Earth creationist, but then he says, the first day, a creative day is not a period of 24 hours, but in Owen Yon Wyoming, that's phonetics for or period of indefinite duration, as the Bible itself teaches us. For in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, the 6 days of this narrative are described and summed up in one day. So he's not a young Earth creationist, he's a day age. And no, none of this matters for salvation, by the way. It's just interesting. Creation began there regarded not in its successive stages, but as a whole. So by the common consent of the commentators, the seventh day, or the day of God's rest, is that age in which we are now living, and which continues until the commission of saints. So in Zechariah 14:7, the whole gospel description is desperation. It's called one day, and contestly in Hebrew, as probably in all languages, day is used in a very indefinite manner, as for instance in Deuteronomy 9:1. And yes, we do this all the time. Back in my day, or those were the days. Or sometimes we go overboard. Well, that was like 100 years. That took a millennia or eon. Being sarcastic. Or that took forever. No, it didn't. Nothing takes for eternity. No process that comes to an end took forever. That doesn't make any sense. Literally. What else could he call these periods but days? What does that Plutarch? Literally, and evening was and morning was considerably diversity of settlement prevails with regard to the exact interpretation of these words. On one hand, it is assumed that the first creative period here is described as an ordinary astronomical and sidereal day of 24-hour duration. Its constituent parts began characterized in the usual way as in evening and morning in the judgment of Casca and others of peculiar fate. Evening was and morning was. It's simply equivalent to the later Hebrew compound evening and morning. Daniel 8:14, the Greek. No way am I trying to pronounce that. In 2 Corinthians 11:25, both of which denote a natural or civil day. Oh yeah, then a fortnight is not a single night. That's just true. Though this is challenged in the case of the Hebrew compound by MacDonald, not the restaurant or Ronald. The language of the fourth commandment, Exodus 20, verse 12, has also appeared as removing it beyond the sphere of doubt that the evening and the morning referred to are the component sections of a earthly day. If you're wondering, here's a brief. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Anyway, we'll get to that later. As to the proper terminus quo of the International Day, however, the advocates of this interpretation are variants among themselves. Yes. Of course, the length of one day particularly determines the length of all 6 of day 1. Yes. If it was a solar day, then they must be considered such. But as the present surreal arguments for the measurement of time were not then established, it is clearly gutterous to proceed on the assumption that it was hence. Neither is to be accepted without demonstration that there were not likewise periods of prolonged duration. It is obvious they were, if it was, and that it appears to be suggested by the terms in which it was described. This conclusion that the creation days were long periods, not simply solar days, is confirmed by a variety of consternation. Yes. And no, this has nothing to do with Jesus dying and rising and suffering for our sins. And, the central core doctrines of Christianity. The Bible does have a lot of things that are been metaphors. Did God create the heavens and the earth? Yeah. Did he create everything? Yes. Genesis 1 being the creation week being a metaphor for God's sovereign power, or it being literal 24-hour days, has nothing to do with it. Because God is so powerful, he could create the universe in 6 seconds. As it is now. Yeah, so yes, God, Elohim, still plural. Called, to call, proclaim, read, light, illuminate, day. Yom, a day. And the darkness, misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, new awakeness, but I'm pretty sure we got darkness right. To call, proclaim, read, he called. Night, a twist, night, adversary. But wait, also, 24-hour days. He called the light day and the dark night. 24-hour days include what we call day when the sun's up, and when the sun goes down, night. In our modern interpretation of a 24-hour day. Think about that. And there was, to fall out, come to pass, become, be, evening. Literally just evening. And there was, to fall out, comes to pass, that, yeah. Morning, dawn, morning. The first. United one first, a day. Inspiring philosophy has an entire playlist about Genesis. That's not biblical archaeology. Yes, Genesis. It's easily called Genesis 1 through 11, the playlist. where he goes through, yes, Genesis 1a, and God said, and Genesis 1b, and it was good, are where he goes over the creation week, what we are going over now. It also goes over the rib and the dust, the serpent, the fall continues, 900-year-old man, the Nephilim, the global the flood, if it's global regional, the arcane animals, the flood, creation renewed, meat and rainbows. This sounds like a funny title, sorry. The nation, the table of nations, and the Tower of Babel. Babel. But yeah, and if you want to suggest anything, you can too. But yes, inspiring philosophy. Actually, if you don't know how to spell that, that's INSPIRINGPHILOSOPHY. That is all for today. Genesis 1:5.